Good. Hello, everyone. Everyone can hear me?
Yes.
Yay, good. Is everyone up here looking at the beautiful fall colors? Because they've really come to life in the last week or so. So it's been beautiful here in town, just kind of driving around and enjoying that. And we've also been so spoiled with the weather. I mean, just fabulous, hot, bright, sunny days. So hopefully you've all had a chance to get out and enjoy that. Welcome to our meeting, and you all made it a week early, which is really fabulous. So thank you so much. You'll notice that we're all set up in the back for our membership renewal. So please renew your membership for 2025. And I'll do our land acknowledgement. The town of Cobourg respectfully acknowledges that we are located in the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa nations, collectively known as the Weems Treaty First Nations, which includes Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Rama, Bosalee, and Georgina Island First Nations. The town of Cobourg respectfully acknowledges that the Weems Treaties First Nations have been stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters, and that today remain vigilant over their health and integrity for generations to come. We are all treaty people. Thank you. So back on course, membership renewals, yes, please. Your club did participate in the NC Forest 100th anniversary event. So that was held out in the forest, and certainly Chris was there, certainly Frank was there. I'm not sure who else from the club was there.
Tish.
Okay, good. So that was great. And board nominations. So put up your hands, everyone. I thought I'd catch you on that. Come on. So we are going to be looking for people to join our board. The annual meeting will be in February. That's when we introduce new board members. So two opportunities. One is an opportunity to join our board. So please consider that option. Second, you could also consider being on the nominations committee, which is a small committee that's going to get together between now and February to kind of choose the next board members. So that's kind of a nice short-lived committee, right? It's going to be like 3 or 4 meetings. So that's something to consider as well. And you can speak to Marina or myself about either of those opportunities. All right, I'll have to get smarter at kind of tricking you into putting your hands up. Outings, Richard. Already, I know.
Oh, sightings.
Uh-oh. Sorry, it's like Richard. It did say Richard, but
Yeah, no, it's sightings. Elizabeth.
Okay, Elizabeth, you're on. So I have to. It used to be a clip.
They changed the mic.
There you go.
Because the people at home, the microphone's over here. So the sightings, there's been lots of sightings lately, I think. They didn't tell me I would have to do my own computer, so I don't have the right glasses on. So, whoops.
Yeah. There you go.
Whoops, too many. No, this one.
There you go.
This is some of the land birds. I don't know about you guys, but our garden has been just alive with juncos in the last 2 or 3 days. Juncos they're a sign that the winter's coming, yeah. And so feeders are really abundant. You had golden crown kinglets? You had the kinglets? Yeah.
Yeah, and
Marina has all the forest birds because she lives in the forest. So she has golden ruby crown kinglets. White-throated sparrows are around, as well as white crowned. Purple finches are in the top right picture. And that's at her feeder, I expect, yeah. And at the bottom is a fox sparrow. So you can expect those around. They're not as common, but you might find them in your backyard. And then once in a while, and it's coming up for November, golden eagles are usually more abundant in November in their migration. They nest in the high Arctic, so they take a little bit of time to come down this far south. Yeah. So these are pictures from the Hawk Watch from 10 days ago. Was it a couple of weeks ago? On the 10th, October 10th. There have been hundreds of turkey vultures moving if you're on the lake shore. Around Port Hope, Roger, how many turkey vultures were there? 1,400 on the day of the count. Yeah, and they're moving. I mean, some of them will stop and have the odd salmon in the Ganaraska. But if you have a slight north wind, these big birds don't travel across the lake. So they will come back down to the lakeshore and then they head west. And they cross the water at Windsor. Yeah, so they follow the Ontario shore, the Lake Erie shore, and cross the rivers at Windsor and follow the Mississippi's valley south and where they expand a little bit more. So there have been hundreds and hundreds. Do you know how to identify a turkey vulture in the air from a long distance? Okay. They fly with their wings on a dihedral. Some other birds fly with them flat, but the turkey vultures are always this way. And they really like wind. The windier it is, the more turkey vultures you'll find moving. Yeah. This too was from the Hawk Watch. Bald eagles on the left is an adult. On the bottom right is an immature. How many bald eagles were there that day, Raj? 40 bald eagles. So bald eagles are they're recovering a little bit. They may not live as long. Can I tell a story from Prince Edward County? I have a young cousin that works for Hydro One on the line crew, and he found on the ground an immature bald eagle in the summertime. It was pouring rain, and he rescued it and took it to Sandy Pines, and then they recovered, and he got to release it. He was a very excited man when he told me that story. There are some pictures on the Facebook, so you might find them on Hydro One at Picton, Ontario. So lots of bald eagles. Then the sharp-shinned hawks also moving. It's a Cooper's hawk. Okay. It's not my pictures. I just have it little. The head is too big. The head is bigger on a Cooper's hawk. Red-shouldered hawk. A couple of little arrows. They have a little at the base of the first primaries. They have a little window, a paler window. That's how you can tell them. They're a boodio. Same family as the red-tailed hawk, but it's a red-shouldered. These also are from the Hawk Watch. So anybody else have anything else? I haven't had any reports of waterfowl. Any waterfowl? Yes, no?
Up our way at Peterborough.
Yeah.
It's not in the area.
Waterfowl?
Lesser Scott and wood ducks.
There have been a fair number of wood ducks hanging around the marsh in Port Hope. through the fall. They've thinned out now. If you want to find shovelers, go to the Brighton Sewage Lagoon. That's the best place for shovelers. And the winter ducks are coming in.
And the big find in Peterborough was the greater white fronted goose that was with a flock of Canada geese at the Del Prairie Park in Peterborough. So it was in with the geese. It was literally like a tame bird. So not quite as close as Marina, but meet a Richard away, and it would just be totally sublime and didn't care because all the other geese were fine with it too.
Like greater white-fronted goose in Peterborough. So if you want to go a little bit further afield,
It is unfortunately gone now. It was there for a week.
but you never know when you might find them again. Yeah.
Okay, no.
How are things on Rice
It
Lake?
was reported today.
It was reported today.
There, yeah.
Okay, so you have to hunt, I guess. So Vince, what's on Rice Lake? Nothing exciting?
Beside me, smaller than I know.
Okay, so I don't know your name, so I can't ask you directly.
12. 12 buses stopped.
Okay, 12 lesser scop. So the winter birds are coming. We saw our first bufflehead earlier this week, but that was at Brighton as well. So the waterfowl, the winter waterfowl will be coming in. Usually Coburg Harbor is the best, is as good a place as any to see winter waterfowl. And they're close to you usually. So far
There were about 10 grants in the Coburg Harbor over the weekend. The rest of us were away, so.
10 grant in Coburg Harbor over the weekend, holy smokes. But all the birders were not at home. Yeah, Richard.
I was in Saskatoon and I did see 48 whooping cranes.
Oh, lucky Richard. So we have to travel a little bit further than Peterborough if we want to see whooping cranes. Yeah.
5% of the world population.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Two timber wolves. Okay. And when we were coming over, we live in Port Hope. So when we were coming over from Port Hope, we had the most wonderful view of the Hunter's Moon. We can't see it from our house because of trees and stuff. We can't see the horizon, but it was a beautiful, beautiful moon. It's been, I think it's a day past full today. It was full last night. The CBC was yakking on about it yesterday. And the other thing that's been really, not tonight, but a few days ago, there were northern lights all over the place. And some wonderful photographs of the northern lights. Did you see them up where you were? Yeah.
Yes.
We couldn't see them in town. One time when we were still banding the Saw-Whet Owls, we were coming up the lane from Candlewick Woods, and the sky was just alive. And by the time we got into town, we couldn't see anything. And it wasn't that the lights had diminished, we just couldn't see it. There was too much ambient light. So you have to have a dark sky. Any of you who live in a dark area in the country are luckier for the northern lights. Yeah. Yes, that's it. Oops. Oh, sorry. Kingfisher's still hanging around the river, and they will hang around as long as there's open water. Yeah. Richard?
Yeah.
So that's a little foot. It's easy to get it.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Well, it's hasn't been that long since our last meeting, so we've only had the one outing since our last meeting, and that was on October the 10th. And that was the Raptor Watch at Skullthorpe Marsh.
But the thing called for please.
I'll just, I'll have to try to figure out how to do it. Okay. So on October the 10th, at Skullthorpe Marsh, and a lot of birds, 1,500 birds flew overhead, and 11 species, eight birders. I wasn't there, unfortunately. I was in other places, but that's a nice outing. That was great. And I understand that the sun shone and it was a beautiful, beautiful day. Coming up, this coming Sunday, the Kirtland Warbler Habitat Walk, and that will be in the Ganaraska Forest. The information was sent out a couple of days ago. Please register for that if you're interested in going. There will be an 8:30 meet at Toronto Road and 401, the parking lot there. And if you're going right straight through to the Ganaraska Forest for 9 o'clock at I can't remember the name of the hill. Anyway, it's in the information. Then coming up on the 24th, that's next Thursday, and rain date Friday the 25th, will be a walk at Weber Conservation Area, and that it will probably be a bit of a it's a bit of a rugged walk. So if you're coming, please register. Make sure you wear good sturdy shoes. Bring a walking stick because the ground can be uneven in places. And one of the things the Nature Conservancy wants is they want each of the participants to sign a waiver because there is uneven ground. There are bears in the area. I know because I've run across one. We scared the crap out of each other and we both went in different directions. But at any rate, I hadn't signed a waiver. I don't know the bear had either, but anyway, so once again, please register for that. And then on November the 10th, we've got a waterfowl outing coming up. And hopefully we have a lot more waterfowl than we had shorebirds earlier in the year when we had one shorebird on the shorebird outing. But the waterfowl are now starting to show up in the harbor. There's a lot of geese there today, and there'll be other things coming by November the 10th. We've got the Wesleyville winter bird count coming up on November the 19th. And then in December, the Port Hope Coburg winter count, then the Rice Lake Plains winter count, and the Presqu'île Furniture Park winter count coming up. I see we've got dates. I hadn't put dates in. Okay. Very good. So if any of you are interested in any of those events, please let us know and register as the information comes out. The information on the Weber walk will be out tomorrow. And so we look forward to some great days. Now, we had talked about having a fall color walk in early October, but there was no color. So, but if you want to see some color, come on out the next 2 outings this coming week because there's beautiful color out there right now. So that would be fantastic. Now, if any of you are not receiving your email notification, please let us know about that so we can get you added to the mailing list. If you have any desires for future outings or any suggestions for future outings, please let me know what you would like to be doing, and we'll see how we can accommodate that. And if you would like to lead an outing on any particular subject, please let us know about that. And one other outing you might consider on your own is like tomorrow evening. I think the skies will be great. There is a comet in the western sky right now, just above the horizon. Tom and Jenny saw it on their way in, and I'm hoping to get down to the West Beach and see if I can get a photograph of it tomorrow evening. So if any of you are interested in going down the West Beach, it's about 45 minutes after sunset is supposed to be the best time to see it, but 15 minutes to 45 minutes after sunset would be a good time. Okay. Oh, yes. 7:30. Okay. Very good. So that's an hour after sunset. An hour and 5 minutes after sunset. Okay. Dawn. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to introduce you to Don, although most of you probably already know him or have been on a hike with him. And he's going to present us some photos tonight. He's taken all the photos himself from his own personal collection. And they're going to feature bird tracks and sign from Central Ontario. And I'm quite used to going out on hikes and seeing the mammal tracks and looking for signs of mammals. So I'm looking forward to learning more about how we're going to find those bird tracks and bird sign. Okay, Don.
Thanks, Libby. Just give us a second while we get organized. On the cover slide, yeah. It's all right. Yeah. Thank you, Marina. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me at the back? No? I'm gonna hold this up closer then. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you. So just as a little bit of a reflection here, I joined the Willow Beach Field Naturalist in 2013. So that's coming up to 12 years since I've been a member of the club, and I've thoroughly enjoyed all the members and the outings in this club. And I just wanted to take this opportunity, since I have the mic, to say thank you. So bird tracks and sign. I'm typically delivering presentations on mammals. That's what I have done for the club in the past. It was actually quite a few years ago. It might even have been back in 2013. It was a while ago. But on a couple of occasions, I've done bird tracks and sign, and I don't think I've ever done it for this club. Yeah, okay, all right, thank you. It's a hobby, a really great pastime that I've enjoyed since retiring from Fleming College. I did teach a little bit about this when I was at the college, but to be honest, since I've retired, and particularly joining the nature clubs like the Willow Beach Field Naturalist, the Peterborough Field Naturalist, and for a while the Kawartha Field Naturalist, that I've really gotten into tracking, photography, and so on and so forth. Before we get into the presentation, I can tell you about a website that I have where my pictures are all posted. It's just my name and .com. So donaldmcleod.com, very easy to remember. And I encourage you to look up any of these photographs on the website if you so feel inclined. So the majority of this presentation will be on bird tracks and nests. I tried to limit the scat, especially for those of you that are not really fond of scat. And I've limited the number of kill sites, and the kill sites are not so graphic. But if you really are interested in those, and be forewarned, on my website, I have the full spectrum. Tracks, that's pretty obvious. You can see plenty of tracks in this photograph, and I'll talk about them a bit more in a minute. But sign is a general word for all sorts of different categories. So scats included, feathers, nests, well, just the list goes, tree cavities, which are a very common nesting spot. So a sign is more of a general term for a number of different categories, and we're going to cover a few of those, but I do on my website have more of those categories of sign than what we'll cover tonight. Before we get going, are there any questions? Because I have a question for you. What is this bird? So first of all, before you blurt it out, what information do you need from me to properly identify what bird made this track?
That's the size.
The size, right on. Anything else?
Is there snow or mud?
Yeah, is it snow or mud? Good question. Okay, so let's address those two questions. I can tell you that this track is 6 inches long and 4 inches wide. So I'm measuring length across this way. You can see the red dot going across, okay? So that is the length of the track. And then the width goes from up here, across here, to down there. Was everybody able to see that red dot? Okay. So that's a pretty big track, actually. Okay, so that's clue number one. And then the other one was the substrate. Well, this is a bit unusual. It kind of looks a bit like snow, but it's actually clay bottom in a pond that had been freshly dug. So there's virtually no plants yet. And this particular bird was walking in about a few inches of water right close to the shore. So does that help? Does it make you any closer to your guess as to what the bird is? Okay, go for it. Anybody know what it is?
Hummingbird?
Supposed to see my presentation already. Yes. A prize to Richard. There we go. Thanks. So here's a great blue heron on a dock, not in the pond. I didn't actually get a photograph of the heron that made the track, unfortunately. I did see the bird, but I didn't get a photograph of the bird there. And this one, if you look down towards the bottom, you can actually see how that track would be made. You can see the 4 toes, and most birds have 4 toes. There are a few birds that have 3 toes. There's the woodpecker, three-toed woodpecker. And you can also see at the back, there's a fairly long toe. That's the rear toe. So if I go back to the picture again, it would have made this impression back here. Okay. This is known as the classic bird track, like the peace sign. So it's got the point, the toes that point forward. There's 3 of them. And then there's the one toe that points to the rear or back. I'll keep this simpler through the presentation and try to describe it as back toe and forward toes or front toes, okay? So that's one down. Here's a fairly big bird that we don't normally get to see tracks of, but I do have some track photos. And you can see the toes here. Now they're gripped onto the branch, as most perching birds will do. That single rear toe is at the back, and then the 3 front toes are up here. They're kind of bunched together to hold onto the branch. But if you get the opportunity to see one land and catch some prey, like in this case, the red-tailed hawk caught a meadow vole. My best guess, I didn't see the meadow vole. This is all a scene after the fact. And there are some tracks there. So zooming in with the camera, I've got a photograph of the track, which you can see right here. And it's pretty close to 4.25 inches long. I've read in my books that the red-tailed hawk track can get up to 5 inches, so for a really big specimen. And again, once again, below, you can see the famous peace sign, right? So there's the 3 toes pointing forward and the 1 toe pointing back, and the toe pointing back is fairly long. A lot of our songbirds have this classic track, bird track, including the American tree sparrow. And there's our photograph we saw at the beginning. So now I can identify that as being American tree sparrow. And really the only reason I know for sure is I saw the bird. Very small tracks. They're only about 1 inch long. And in similar fashion, the dark-eyed junco is another bird that frequents the ground or on the snow surface during the wintertime. And again, I saw this particular junco and I rushed out, took a picture. So I know this is dark-eyed junco. If, to be honest with you, I was out and I saw some small bird tracks, I could not reliably identify them to the species. Some better people than me, maybe, but not me. A little bit larger is the mourning dove, but once again, still producing that classic bird track with the 3 toes pointing forward and 1 toe pointing back. They don't hop or skip like those smaller birds do. They tend to walk, and you can see that in this trail right here. You can see there's 1 foot in front of the other. Another thing you might notice is the curved nature of the track. You can see there's kind of a curve to it. And that the one track points in, the next track points in, kind of pigeon-toed effect. So that's a very distinctive trail, and one that I'm sure many of you may have already seen in your backyards. A bit of a clincher is the size of it. So whereas you're seeing like those little 1 inch small bird tracks, our mourning dove is closer to 1.5 inches. Can you think of any other bird that might produce a similar type of track? So it's actually quite common in the towns and cities. Yes, pigeons or rock doves, rock pigeons. I don't know, what's the name we're going with now? Rock pigeon. Yeah. What do you think would be the difference in their track over the mourning dove track? Size. So in fact, their tracks, and I wish I could show you a photograph, but I have yet to photograph. I don't know why it's missed, but I should go out and get one. 2 inches, okay, as opposed to 1.5 inches. So, and the toes will be a bit thicker. So there's another one for you. All right, American crow is another really interesting one to look for the tracks in the wintertime. And it's somewhat common to find. So I'm going to zoom in on the feet in the photograph. And notice that you've got your rear pointing or back toe. And then there's a toe right here. And then there's a couple of toes over on this side. Those other 2 toes are close together, as you'll see in the photographs of the tracks. So if you see here on the 3 pointing forward, there's 2 that are right side by side. And same with that track. And it's a common feature in Corvidae, or the crow family. American crow, common raven, blue jay. The main difference here, like if you came across a common raven track, American crow is only about 3 inches long for the length of the track. Common raven would be about 4 inches or even bigger, a much bigger bird. Blue jays, 2.25 inches long, and they keep their toes tighter together. And you don't see it very often. I think I've only got one so-so photograph. All right, we're going to switch gears now. Those are all just a small sample of the birds that have that classic bird track. the peace sign. Now we get into what we call the game birds, and they have tracks that are quite a bit different at the back. So the front's kind of similar, so 3 toes pointing forward. Just zoom in on these guys. So there's your forward toes pointing forward, front toes, and then the back toe is really short. And this is a common feature in all of the game birds. So what is the impact on the tracks? Well, here's a couple of wild turkey tracks, and we'll zoom in on one of them. You can see that back here, that rear toe kind of registers it like a dot. It doesn't look like it's full long toe, as you see in the heron or the other birds that we showed just before this one. The other thing to take note on the wild turkey is a big bird. And so you're looking at a track length here. If you look at the measuring scale below there, about 5 inches. And that's a pretty common, anywhere from 4.5, maybe 5.5 would be common measurements for the wild turkey. And I'm pointing that out because there's another bird that has a very, very similar track that we'll come to in a minute. But on this particular bird, this actual bird I did not see, but this was the final part of the whole trail where you see these tracks. And if we back up the bus, there was this meandering trail through the snow, the deeper snow. The other photograph was on the road, and there was like a shallow layer of snow on the road and some beautiful clear tracks. But now you can see as the wild turkey is walking through the deeper snow, it's made this furrow through the snow, and you can almost not tell the individual tracks. But a cool thing happened when the turkey arrived there. It flew in across the road and landed in the ditch. So you can see tail drag down here. You can see an imprint from the body here and a beautiful snow angel effect where the great big wings pressed down on the snow as it landed. Once in a lifetime, I haven't seen it again. So that's the wild turkey. And there's tons of other stuff to show you about wild turkey tracks and trails, but that's just like an intro. So a related bird, the ruffed grouse, this is a fine specimen from up at Algonquin Park. And posed beautifully, showing off beyond the beautiful colors, his feet. And once again, here's that short rear toe and the longer front toes. So you get a track like this. It's very similar to the wild turkey track, except for one difference being the size. It's very simple. It's about half the size of the wild turkey track. So whereas the wild turkey track was in around that 5-inch length, now we're looking at pretty close to 2.5 inches for the length of this track. It's ruffed grouse. Now we're going to switch gears a bit again to tracks that are a bit similar to the game bird tracks, except for they have webbing. They have web between the toes. We're going to start off with our common mallard. And this is not a great photograph, but the nice thing I like about this photograph, he's got his foot dangling out the back. So he's showing off features. And so I can point out that small rear toe right here. Can you sort of see where I'm moving that red dot? Okay. And then the longer forward facing toes, plus most importantly, the webbing in between the toes. And I'm going to point out something that shows up. If you look at this toe, can you tell that it's curved a bit? Okay, so that is a feature of both the waterfowl and the gulls. So the gulls, I'll show you in a minute, also have webbing. But in contrast to wild turkey or ruffed grouse, where the outer toes are straight, these ones have a bit of a curve. So that also helps in identification purposes. So here are some mallard tracks in the winter time, obviously, and beautiful tracks show up in, again, a nice shallow layer of snow. That also happened to be a bit soft from a mild spell. That's how these tracks form so well. If this area had gone soft, mild weather, and then froze, virtually no tracks would form. But they do show nicely some of the things we've been talking about here. So there's that rear toe, just like a little dot. And then the webbing right here shows up rather nicely. And then the other thing to point out is down here with the tape measure, we're looking at about a 3-inch track length. I don't suppose this track will be a bit bigger, eh? So this is a Canada goose. Just as an aside, it has a couple of leg bands, which is kind of neat. This was a bird that was on the dock, the Brighton fishing dock, I think they call it in Brighton. That's where we go sometimes when we're birding at Presqu'île. That
The government dog.
the government dock.
That one.
I think
Not in park.
it's really close to the park though. It's in Brighton, but it's not far from the park. Anyway, that's where this goose was. I did follow up with the tags and it was tagged in the general area some years ago. Anyway, back to the feet. You can see the rear toe back here. It's sticking up a bit, just because he's lifting up his feet. And the Canada goose makes the following tracks, and very similar to the mallard tracks, aren't they? But bigger. So we look at the scale, and 5 inches is a pretty common track length for the Canada goose. Now, what bird have I already mentioned that has a track length of about 5 inches? The wild turkey. Okay. So what is an easy way to tell the difference between these two?
Wedding.
The webbing. And then supposing the snow didn't really allow you, or maybe it was in some sand or something, and it didn't allow you to see the webbing. And that happens sometimes. What's the other thing that you can rely on to tell the goose from the turkey?
Curvature.
Yes. The curvature, which you can see here again, in the outer toes, would be found in the goose or the mallard, but not in the turkey.
Didn't the turkey have a rear toe too?
It does, and it registers more than this one. And also, I find that the rear toe in the turkey kind of goes straight out, whereas on the mallard and the goose, that rear toe is kind of bent a bit. So that helps a bit. The registering of the rear toe is not 100% reliable in the mallards and the geese. Any other questions while we're? Yes.
If you have a wild turkey and you have a rough grouse, you have a immature wild turkey that is in the size range.
Generally speaking, the turkeys grow. Well, so the question is, if you had both wild turkey and rough grouse, and it was an immature young wild turkey, would there be some crossover in the size of the feet in the tracks? And my feeling is in snow, no. Perhaps in sand or mud at an earlier stage for the turkey, there'd be. But to be honest, I think even on the young turkeys, they still have pretty big feet. Can't confirm that for sure, but that's my impression. And certainly by the time they get to winter, they're almost full size. That's a good question, though. All right, another webfoot bird, ringbill gull. And I don't have an opportunity to zoom in on this one, but right back here, you can see a little rear toe that's raised up a bit, which has an impact on the tracks. So when we go to the tracks, they don't really register that toe in the back. There's the metatarsal pad right here, also known as the sole of the foot. It's different than our sole, right? It's totally different morphology with the birds and people. But anyway, the rear toe generally does not show up for the gulls like it would for the mallard. And the size of the track, even though it looks very similar to a mallard, again, both the mallard and the gull would be quite a bit smaller than the goose.
but it's only about 2 inches by 2 inches, so the size also helps out with the ringbill gull track versus the mallard track. I haven't got a track measurement for a herring gull, so it'd be interesting to know. Now we're again switching gears on the shape of the feet. Both owls and woodpeckers have zygodactyl. Anyway, basically 2 toes pointing forward and 2 toes pointing backwards. It's a totally different foot morphology and hence track. So this is an adult great horned owl just west of Peterborough, and one of my favorite photographs. And then you'll be maybe reminiscence of this one because this showed up on the Willow Beach site a few times, and it's still on the photo gallery for the Willow Beach. This was during the breeding bird count at Wesleyville a few years ago, and it's a juvenile, probably could be classified as a fledgling, maybe. What do you think, Roger? Yeah. So a recently fledged great horned owl just outside of the little village of Wesleyville. And why I included him, other than the connection with our club activities, is you can actually see, although this zooming in is a bit fuzzy, you can see the rear toes, 2 of them, and then the front toes, 2 of them. Okay, is that different foot morphology? All right, well, what's the consequence? And what is the consequence in the tracks? I know this is a wintertime in January photograph, and it's a bit hard to see. But if you look at the imprint in the center here, it's roughly K-shaped, like a capital K flipped backwards. And that is a very unique looking track that's specific to owls that comes from the shape of that foot. I've only got 2 pictures in my collection. So it's kind of hard to come by. And I don't have any photographs of woodpecker tracks. Kind of stands to reason though, doesn't it? Where do they spend most of their time? Up in the trees. So this was a kill site. The great horned owl, I think, but I've only put owl up here because I don't know for sure. It could have been a barred owl. I don't have any data on track sizes for owls. And I don't have enough of a collection and experience to be able to provide accurate identification here. But there was parts of a eastern cottontail rabbit in along the driveway. That was actually shoveling snow and suddenly a leg popped out. And it was the poor rabbit. The rest of it had been carried away. And luckily the great horned owl had stopped to rip apart the carcass as they're wanting to do and had left that track. The other photograph I have, again in January, poor lighting and all that kind of thing, but you can see part of the K right here. So there's that 2 toes pointing that way and 2 toes pointing this way. And this one's a bit bigger though. It's almost 3 inches long. Does that mean that this is like a greater opportunity or possibility of being a great horned owl? Maybe. It had killed a gray squirrel and it had eaten up most of it.
Don, which are the front toes and which are the back toes?
Oh, you got, no.
Okay.
My guess is the 2 that are kind of closer together are the front ones. But that's just a guess. I will find out for you though. I have books. Now, at that same site where there were bits and pieces of the squirrel, here you can see some of the fur hair. There's a splat. So this is going to be our transition to a few slides of scat related photographs. Maybe most of you are aware of this, but birds are different than mammals. They're different, obviously, than us. Mammals have different streams, a urine stream and a feces stream or poop stream. Birds, it all comes out of the same hole. And generally, a lot of the birds will roll around the food item in their esophagus and gizzard and all that. Make a pellet. Cough up the pellet, so that's the fur and the bones. And then out the ventral opening comes a squirt. Or in some cases, a solid piece of poop or droppings. And in this case here, the owl produced mainly a splat. And the dark objects are some of the solid pieces that didn't get digested but went through the system. Many of you have probably seen the great horned owls at Dixon's Woods. I don't know if they're there still. Margaret, do you have any
I
idea?
think so. But not every year.
Okay. So this is a few years ago, and there was still a pair at that point, and there was a nest. But what I wanted to show you here was down at the base of the trees in multiple locations in Dixon's Woods, you could find a splat. So this is the uric acid precipitate that comes out in a liquid form, and it gets ejected out, drops down onto the tree. And then down at the base of the tree, you quite often find pellets. You know, a lot of you are familiar with owl pellets. And so there was fairly good quantities of owl pellets at Dixon's Woods. It was a pretty reliable place to go and see them. I didn't open this one up. Somebody may have done that in the past, but you can see how its components are spread out, and there's a lot of bone fragments in there in that picture. So that's an owl pellet. And both of those sometimes are difficult to distinguish from mammal scat, but when you look at coyote scat and fox scat, it tends to be a bit longer and tubular than tapered. So those are two things to look for. And usually still a bit more, if it's a fresh piece of scat, a bit more goo. Sorry for the description. But the owl pellets come all out nice and clean and beautiful. Double-crested cormorant are kind of an interesting bird. I wish I could show you a track because they're really a unique looking track produced by the fact that they have an arrangement of 4 toes pointing out in the one direction with webbing between all 4 toes. So there's 3 patches of webbing compared to the 2 in the waterfowl. But in the theme of scat, you're probably familiar with the impact of cormorants. And here's a tree, and this is Lake Simcoe, and the cormorants are up near the top of the tree. And you can see they do what's called a uric acid spray. So it shoots out quite a distance, or else drops down. And a lot of this is covering the leaves of the branches of that tree. And of course, uric acid in its whitish color, the precipitate on bird droppings, is usually a good way to differentiate bird droppings of scat from mammal scat. So mammal scat will not have these bits of white. See on here, you can see white there, white there. That's more of a feature for birds. They don't pee. Everything comes out in the one package. So this is ruffed grouse scat. And going back to comparison with mammals, sometimes maybe can be confused with porcupine scat, but porcupine scat does not have the white precipitate on it. And I tend to kind of relate the porcupine scat more to peanuts in the shell. So it's a bit bigger, okay, in size. These pieces here are only about 1 inch long and maybe 1/4 inch wide. They're pretty small. Ruffed grouse will hang out in a tree, roost in a tree, digesting the meal from the day, and as a consequence will drop scat or poops or droppings down below it in one spot. And then it might come back and roost in the same location. You might get a pile here from several roostings. Wild turkey scat is proportionally bigger. So here's one here, and again, another one where, once again, you can see this uric acid white precipitate on the scat. Mostly I've seen vegetation material in wild turkey scat, but of course, wild turkeys are known to also eat other things like frogs or So I would imagine those scats would show that. Canada goose scat, I think you're all rather widely familiar with it. I don't need to spend a lot of time on it. I'm just too overburdened with goose scat to talk anymore about it. But again, you know, the white precipitate is a bit of a feature that helps to identify it as a bird scat, and then you kind of look at the location of the scat and the size of the scat. Goose. Now I promised I'd keep the scat discussion to a minimum. And now we're going to switch over to nests, bird nests. So this would be one of the sign categories. And here we have a lovely American robin carrying some nesting material. Now, this robin was not the one that made this nest, but this is a robin nest and a beautiful blue eggs inside it. This was actually right attached to the house, right where I used to park the car. So every time I'd come home from work, I'd get out of the car, take a quick picture, go into the house without trying to, it never seemed to be bothered by it. Robins are pretty calm that way, aren't they? All right, here's another nest that's, all these are sort of classic bird nests with some variations. And this one here has a kind of a unique feature. What is it? Moss. So there's moss integrated into the construction of the nest, and that's a feature that the Eastern Phoebe uses. So if you see a nest with that moss, pretty much guaranteed an Eastern Phoebe nest. Here's another neat one. So we've got your hummingbird. Richard, we've got your hummingbird.
I thought it was a turkey, but I couldn't.
Wow. Wait till you see the size of this bird. Now, there is a really cool feature. First of all, the nest is a cup style nest, obviously very small. But from my book, I've read this. This is not something I knew about in the past, but I've read about it. The lichen is attached to the nest, and that was the bird doing that. That's not lichen suddenly growing. There is some natural growing lichen by the on the branch nearby. And I don't know, let's just kind of theorize here with me. Is it because there's some lichen on the branch and they're trying to blend in, do you think? Well, why are they putting lichen on their nest? Any ideas? Camouflage? Okay.
It's decorating.
Decorating. Well, they also use spider web material, silk, spider silk, in their nest construction, which kind of an interesting enterprise. I don't know how they do it. Has anybody ever seen them make a nest? This is my only photograph of a hummingbird nest. Mud nests. The barn swallow, you can often find these in barns. This one's under a bridge over a county road, and a healthy brood of 5. The female Baltimore Oriole does all the work in creating these beautiful nests. So this was in the backyard, and we had the great privilege of seeing the nest being built and watch the young being fed. And then several months later, here we are in January. This is when this picture was taken, and the nest is still attached to the tree. There's wonders of construction. It stayed, I think, until the spring. And then it got blown off finally in a windstorm, and I picked it up and put it into the shed. Still have it. Red-winged blackbirds. Here's a male doing his big territorial song. They have a great fondness for cattail marshes. And here is a red-winged blackbird nest. It's at a stage in the season where the cattails, the fresh batch of cattails have grown up. That's all the greenery that you see here. But the birds did take old vegetation pieces of grasses and weave them in amongst the green leaves of the cattails there. Made kind of an interesting contrast. I love the eggs for the red-winged blackbirds. They're kind of a beautiful pale blue with almost dribbles of paint on them, which you see right there. Similarly, in the same kind of habitat, the marsh with a lot of cattails, you'll find marsh wrens. Not as common, obviously not as common as the red-winged blackbird, but we do have quite a few of them close to home in the nearby marsh. And they have a rather interesting nest. So can you spot it? It's a black blob in the middle there. Zoom in, there it is. It's got kind of a oblong shape to it. It's all enclosed top and bottom, except for a little dark hole right here, which is the side entry and exit point for the bird. Pretty cool, eh? Now we're going to go to a few nests that are down on the ground level. And in this case, mallard. Mallards don't fuss a lot with making a nest. They do look for a protected spot primarily. And then they, bring in some materials to kind of soften it up. In this case, you can actually see some down feathers that have been incorporated into the nest. The nest was not originally exposed like this. It was at my neighbor's property, and he had a stack of discarded branches, old branches, wind blown branches in a pile from the previous fall through the winter and the early spring. And then when breeding season came along, the mallard scooted in underneath that pile and made the nest and laid the eggs. And then my neighbor just had no idea about this, but then he wanted to move the pile of branches. So he did that and suddenly found this nest. So called me, I went, took a picture, we put all the branches back, tried to recreate the condition, but to no avail. A raccoon came along and ate all the eggs. So sorry for that bit of bad news. It happens. And then mallards are pretty adaptive. So that female feed for a while and mate again and produce another clutch before the season's out, especially if this particular one was early. All right, my favorite bird, practically, one of them, the common loon. I participate in the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey. Have you heard of that before? Okay, so these loons are on the south end of Chemong Lake near Peterborough, and I've been documenting them for several years now. And it's a pretty easy project because you mainly need to do it at least once a month, where you go out and you count how many adults and how many juveniles there are, keep track of them and see how they're doing. So this one was over near an island in the lower Chemong Lake, and it built its nest, which is right here, on what was a floating piece of shoreline. So because the lake level changes dramatically in spring, bits of the cattail marsh will come loose and float around. Some of them quite big, almost as big as this room. And but this one was a smaller patch, and it drifted until it got to the island and it snagged. And then the water dropped and it stayed there, and the loon chose it for a nesting platform. Kind of cool. And it did successfully produce a juvenile, a baby chick. And this is a closer location to home. There's a pair of loons that are called the culvert loons, because they go through a road culvert to get to the quieter bay, and they make a nest there every year. And this year successfully produced 2 chicks. I waited until she was all done, until the eggs had hatched and they had left, and I went back and took this photograph. Nothing too spectacular, really, just kind of a plain spot, raised up obviously above water level, but just mainly old cattail pieces that it would have discovered and found, just dropped down there. It's not a fancy nest at all. Big stick nests are another feature of birds. Here's something you don't see every day, is an osprey nest in a tree independent of an actual platform. And this was on Rice Lake. Now, it's still got a man-made touch or some string here included in the nest. We're more accustomed to seeing the platform nest, and this one's kind of lovely because there's actually 3 nestlings. Usually there's 1 or 2. 3 is not as common. And there's, of course, many other stick nests. Now, how many of you have seen a heronry or rookery for the herons? For your review, okay. So this one is north of Havelock. Not too far from the Sandy Lake Road, which is a famous butterfly road up there. And this is on, I think it's County Road 46, I think. County Road 46, north of Havelock. There, and now it's no longer used. We've been, Colleen and I have been driving it, past couple of years, and we haven't seen any. This is from just a few years ago, and there was some active use of the marsh there. They like making stick nests in stands of old dead trees. And you can see here a couple juveniles and then a couple more on this. Here's a better view of the stick nest in that area. All right, let's switch gears to what I call tree cavity. So that's another sign of birds. And start off with another one of my pet birds, the black-capped chickadee. I love them. It's coming out of the tree cavity right now with a wad of little bits of wood. And their choice is primarily in standing dead trees that are starting to rot. So it's easier for them to actually pick out the wood. They're not strong enough like a woodpecker would be to carve out a hole or a nesting cavity in a solid tree. But this is what they do, and going back in for some more here. Now I've got a slate of woodpeckers here, and these ones are quite capable of boring out a hole for a nest. And as you go through these photographs, you can take note of, to me it's marvelous, they don't go any further than they have to. So the hole is just a bit bigger than the bird. So you can see that here with this northern flicker. And again, here with the hairy woodpecker, you can actually see a juvenile right here in the nesting tree cavity. This is actually a picture from the Wesleyville bird count just a couple of years ago. And in this tree here, there's obviously a tree cavity. And what's kind of neat is this one shows a marking right here. So in some of the cases where the woodpecker would come up and its claws would grip on and hang on to that part of the tree as it peered into the hole. And there we got a yellow-bellied sapsucker sticking its head out and checking the horizon before it flies away. They were regularly going in and out feeding the young. Remember that, Jerry? Yeah. That was a good one. Now this one's back closer to Peterborough. And I've got both the male, this is the male here, red-bellied woodpecker, and the female red-bellied woodpecker. This would have been a breeding pair. And actually it's very faint, but if you look inside the hole, you can see the mouth of a nestling being fed. Remember, the female red-bellied has a gray top of the head, red at the back, in contrast to the male, which has all red gray cross. Other holes or cavities, we don't call these cavities so much, we call them burrows. So this is actually not far from Rice Lake, and pretty much, I think, area 1 of the summer Northumberland bird count. I can't remember the name of it. Do you remember where this gravel pit is? I think so. Yeah. So it's a bit from Roseneath, it's west and north. That'd be the spot. It's still there, right? Yeah. So that was the one year I think, or I did 1 or 2 years I did that part, and now I tend to do more area 2. But there's a good population of bank swallows here. And so you see all of these burrows inside of the gravel pit. Now here's a burrow in the side of what I would call like a mini cliff. This is right along Lake Ontario in the Wesleyville bird count. And this is a belted kingfisher. I knew before the bird even showed up, based on my familiarity with the structure. And then we saw the bird come after we were done. And thanks to Jerry, because I couldn't reach, I had to stand back, use my zoom lens to get a picture of the hole, and he could hold up the tape measure, extend the tape measure. If you get a good enough tape measure, it's stiff enough that you can extend it and then hold it up to get something up high. Just a little trick. Anyway, feature here would be the size of the hole. This is a much bigger hole than the swallows would make for their nest. So it's about roughly 4 inches high and about 3.5 inches wide. But the other distinctive feature are the 2 groove marks where the feet drag in and out as they come in and leave from the burrow.
Is that at the lake shore?
Yes,
Oh,
where the what's the other swallow that's along there? It's just escaping me right now. That nests along that. Is it the rough-winged or? Yeah, the rough-winged swallows nest along there. For some reason, I just couldn't get to where their nests were. Settled on kingfisher. We did see the swallows. A few feathers to show you. This is kind of a fun project. Generally speaking, you're going to find feathers that are just kind of one-offs. And so got kind of yanked out or whatever. And then you'll see a single feather. And it always becomes a bit of a challenge because that's all you've got to go on. But there are some great books. And at the end, I'll show you the books that I use. And iNaturalist is actually getting not bad at matching up the feather to bird species. So if you ever want to try that out, just load up your picture to iNaturalist and see what they got to say. Plus, there are a number of iNaturalist curators, members that have good experience with feathers, and they'll render pretty good decisions on the identification. So big birds make big feathers. This is Canada goose, and you can see it's pretty close to a foot long. And I've got a couple of wild turkey, different parts of the birds with different colors and patterns. We'll show different feathers, obviously. And here you can see this feather is very different from that feather, both from wild turkey. And again, this one's at 13 inches long. And when you see a great big feather, you can start to really think about big birds, right? So Canada goose, wild turkey. A lot of feathers you see come from mourning doves. And because they're a very, very common prey item for a number of raptors. And invariably, when a raptor gets a mourning dove, it just rips all the feathers out to get to the good stuff. So this is mourning dove. This one I didn't actually know for sure when I found it because of the amount of white on it. But I brought it in and I put it on a board and with a measuring ruler and went to my book, and sure enough, matched with mourning dove. Now there's a feather that we found in Pixon's Woods, which had quite a bit of yellow on it. So this is one side of the feather, and here's the other side, northern flicker. And you know what our subspecies is called here? Yellow shafted, yes, exactly. And then the one out west is called red shafted flicker. So yeah, so they're both northern flickers, same genus and species, but as different subspecies. Ours has the yellow, the ones out west have the red. So it's kind of a nice find. I haven't got pictures of it here, but on one of our tracking walks at the Kahnaweraska headquarters, Richard, you may remember this, there was a pile of feathers that we had there from a kill, and those feathers we identified as northern flicker. Unmistakable blue here for the blue jay, blue and a bit of black and a bit of white. And here's an interesting collection of feathers. This was actually a collection of feathers I found outside in the grass, and I knew that the lawnmower was just going to rip them up. So I gathered them together and carefully laid them all out, took a picture. I have another picture with a ruler, which I didn't show you here. But I can tell you that most of these longer feathers are only about 2.5 to 3 inches. And the ones down here with the black and white are only about 2 inches. These are all small feathers. And I didn't know. I honestly didn't know. I had to use one of my books here and came to the conclusion that it was all from a white-breasted nuthatch. Okay, so we're actually doing pretty well for timing still, aren't we? I'm going to give you another test. Now, you can ask me any questions, but we'll see how well you do on the first one's the toughest one, and the second one's quite easy. All right. And then I have a mini presentation, which is kind of like its own package, which only should take about 10 minutes or so. All right. So there's 4 slides related to this mystery species. This is slide number 1. Slide number 2. And then for scale reference, slide number 3. And slide number 4. Just as an explanation, this is what it looks like when you go on the ball-shaped item. Okay. Can you see enough detail to identify what's in this photograph?
Fish scales.
Fish scales, excellent, and fish bones. Okay, so that's a bit of a clue. So I'm just going to back up and I'll show you the pictures again. All right, there's number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Cormorants. Okay, we've got a guess of cormorants. Any other guesses? Gull? Osprey? All right, well, gull. In fact, it's a ring-bill gull. And I can say for certainty because I actually saw the bird doing this. Not this particular bird. This is a bird that I think it's a Coburg bird, actually. But the gull that used to hang out on our dock did all this. So what is going on, first of all? You notice here, this is a splat. This is the uric acid coming out of the gull with a little bit of darker undigested material. But that is technically the scat or droppings or poop. This is a pellet, much like the owl pellet. But this is what the gull produces as a pellet. So it's like a spherical ball of the contents being fish scales and bones, whatever the gull was eating. And they cough it up. Because for some reason, it's held together by a little bit of slime, maybe, I don't know. Because as soon as the wind comes up, it disintegrates. And literally all I had to do was just like touch it and it went like that. Well, then I spread the contents around to get a picture. That's pretty cool thing though, isn't it? How many of you have actually seen one of those balls? Yeah, some people get excited by the most crazy things, eh? All right, there's number 1. Number 2 is going to be much easier. All right, so there's 2 slides to go with. This one and that one. Affiliated, yes. Okay, now I'm going to come back to this guy here in a minute, but there's another bird sign in this photograph. Aside from the big one in the middle, which is the, yes. So there are some little holes right along here. There. And notice that they tend to be in lines, which is another feature of yellow-bellied sapsucker. So there's actually a 3rd species, mystery species here. You all got it, which is good. Okay. And these are all just wood chips from that hole that the woodpecker was making. Now, this picture, and more so this one, I think you can see it fairly well, but if you look at the foot of this pileated woodpecker, you can actually see 2 toes pointing forward and 2 toes pointing backward. So there's that zygodactyl track configuration, much like the owls, but the owls are again more of a K shape. And this type of foot structure and potentially track, but again, I've never seen a woodpecker track. Has anybody here seen a woodpecker track? I didn't think so. Pretty uncommon. Does happen, I guess. Okay, now we can kind of relax and just have a bit of fun. This is a little story that Colleen and I would like to share with you. Colleen, my wife, got to experience this with me just a few years ago. And it's a story about house finch in the Christmas wreath. So here's a lovely male house finch, has some of the key features is some of that purple color, red, purple, and then you got the brown streaking on the side in contrast to the softer tone markings of the purple finch. And of course, at the top of the head, you can see the brown patch. So he's really showing himself off nicely. And with him in the wreath, tucked away here, is the female. And this is about mid-April. And what is going on is, here's the wreath. The male is up near the top, and he's standing guard, patiently waiting for the female to test out the house. So at this point, the nest is not built. There's about 2 or 3 strands of vegetation there that she's brought in, but she's literally just sitting there. Is this the right place or not? It's kind of cool. Now, we had the greatest window, didn't we? Like we could see this from our front window with the blinds down. We keep the blinds down with the slats that prevents bird window collisions. But we could kind of poke through with the camera lens between the slats and take photographs from inside. They were totally comfortable and unaware of us. And then this one, I'm actually outside of the house, quite far away, using my zoom lens to get a picture like this. So mid-April until about the 3rd week of May is when all this, it was about a 7-week process. And what's kind of a funny part of the story, though, is we initially saw these birds in February. They came and they visited the wreath. Of course, this was up at Christmas time, right? And it was still up there in February, and the birds were showing up. We thought that was kind of cool. But I said to Colin, well, you know, we don't really want bird droppings on the Christmas tree. It's going to wreck the Christmas tree. He says, yeah, we want to see a nest by the house benches. So we kept the wreath up. Good plan. Worked out beautifully. So here we are, and I'm just going to have a quick check of my dates here. And April 14th to April 16th is when the nest was built. It only took a couple of days, which is fascinating. And then April 20th, so a week after the first visit in April, the first finch egg was laid. And there you see that's the first finch egg. And then it took a few days for all of the eggs, but we now have 2 species.
Oh.
We have house finch and we have brown-headed cowbird. So there are 5 house finch eggs right there. And there are 2 brown-headed cowbird eggs down here. I actually saw the cowbirds come in. Of course, the house finches were agitated, but you would think that they would then kick them out, right? But no, they just kept them there, and the female laboriously moved the eggs around. So here's this pattern, and then that pattern. So you look, see how it's different? I'm in the same spot with my camera. And I mean, that was just 2 of the changes that occurred during those weeks of incubation. And what I would do is in the house, I'd check, okay, is she on the nest? She usually take off to do her business once in a while, right? I'd sneak out, step on the stepping stool, quick take a picture and sneak back in the house. Never bothered the bird a bit. First hatchling was one of the brown-headed cowbirds. So that's what this one is. And you can see there's still 5 finch eggs and there's still 1 brown-headed cowbird egg. And then the next day is the first house finch hatchling. Can you see the difference?
Yeah.
Look at that cool yellow mohawk style in the house finch. Whereas the brown-headed cowbird is quite homely. So we're now looking at say this is now May. So May 6th was the first brown-headed cowbird. May 7th was the first house finch hatchling. And then that went on for a few more days until they were all hatched, except for 2. And I'll show you those 2 at the end. Here we are at the point where they've grown quite a bit. And these are all house finches. The brown-headed cowbird is gone.
They died.
They died. Yeah. And the adult, I never saw any remains. So at some point, and I missed it, the adults one of the adults must have carried it out, probably the female, I'm guessing, and cleaned it out of there. Probably the
It's
the
because of
diet.
Because of the diet.
Yeah.
Dan Koslovic did his master's in it at Brock. And the finches feed only grain. The finches feed only grain to their chicks, unusual for most small birds. But the cowbirds need animal protein. So they die, 100% die. It was an amazing, amazing thesis. But that's, his study site was lawns around St. Catharines. But all of the cowbirds died, 100%.
So they obviously would do better with other species of birds that
Well,
are
they
insect
were just meeting for the first time in Southern Ontario.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
So as we move along in development here, we get to the point where here's an example of the adult female feeding the juveniles. I love that bright yellow pattern on the bill, which is like a target, right? That eventually disappeared. You can see it here quite plainly. Here we are. This is the day, the graduation day, the day we've all been waiting for. And this is the day that they fledged. Pauline and I got our chairs. We went out. We sat in the yard like dutiful parents. And they loved us, of course. And then the first one left and landed in the birch tree and looked back at the other ones. What's wrong with you guys? Get going. And it took actually all day before all four of them left the nest, but they did all fledge. And that was May 26th. So it took about 7 weeks for the whole process, right from the start of building the nest to these four leaving the nest, which is kind of an interesting thing. A few weeks later, finally got the gumption to get the nest off of the wreath. That was a long Christmas wreath, eh? So we're well into the summer now. And I was staggered by the amount of droppings. So I read up on that, and because a lot of birds carry fecal sacs away from the nest. Apparently house finches do not, other than maybe the first 3 days, they'll take some little sacs out. But after that, it's quite apparent that these house finches kind of back up, stick their butt out, and pile it up around the edge of the nest. Cool, eh? So what's the other thing you see there? 2 eggs. So one is a light colored egg, that's a house finch, and the other one is a peppered with some brown spots, and that's the brown-headed cowbird. So those two never did hatch. And I was intrigued with the fact they got left behind and not removed, but it must be kind of difficult for the bird to remove the eggs. And then I did one final thing, you know, with me with my tape measure. So I did a measurement of the size of the bird nest, which was 2 inches. And that's our Christmas wreath house finch. Yeah, Colleen was, you didn't quite hear her, but then he throws out my Christmas wreath, which I did. I mean, could have tried to clean it, but some of the corrosion had got down into the lights. That is the presentation, and I'm open to any questions, any observations. Any kinds of different bird sign that I haven't reported tonight that you've seen, you'd like to report on? Good number, yes.
Don, was the Christmas wreath, the greenery artificial?
Oh, yeah.
Plastic.
Yeah,
Okay.
didn't mind it at all. I mean, in the end, when you think about it, it was just like a substrate. Yeah, exactly, but it was just a substrate for all of their natural materials that they used to make the nest. Yeah, Jerry.
Are behavioral things considered a sign, like say an owl being mobbed or?
Not in the classic sense. That's more a whole category. So the question is, are bird behavior topics considered a sign? And not that I'm aware of. I think that's a whole new category of study. Well, not new, but different category. Bird behavior. related to just more bird biology, and tied into bird identification. So when we're looking at our field guides, there's all sorts of information in there that are unrelated to this topic of tracks and sign. So tracks and sign, we're just looking for what got left behind as a clue to us finding and identifying the bird or mammal in the future. Still an important topic, obviously. So your example was great horned owls being mobbed by, I didn't hear, but probably crows or whatever. Yeah, so still an important topic, but it's generally not in this category of tracks and sign. Yes.
Where's the turkey vulture?
So the turkey vulture, I don't have any track photos, but it would be fun to get them. Thing is that they're typically kind of soaring around and then landing like on the side of the road to feed on a carcass. They're not really presenting themselves into locations that are ideal for making tracks. Otherwise, I'm sure I would have seen one by now.
Usually gone by the winter.
And by the winter, yeah, really good point, Roger. So you're not going to find their tracks, turkey vulture tracks in the winter time. That'd be a tough spot. Tough spot too for great blue herons. I do have a couple of photographs of their tracks in the winter time, but that's a really tough spot for the heron unless there's an open water course with some fish in it that they can feed on.
They're doing the foot shape like the owls.
No, I think, that's a good question. I'm going to look up in the book in a second and I'm going to let you know. Yes.
Have you ever thought about looking at the size of a bird from a phenodoptry standpoint?
No. So can you explain that a bit more then? So the question is, if I looked at the size of a bird from a Fibonacci point of view, so that's that mathematical relationship. Yeah.
So because I thought that you were measuring the bird.
Oh, okay.
And my sense tells me that the rule would apply to the next project too. Like there would be
Some proportion there that relates to it. Interesting. I've never thought of that before, but really, really good suggestion. Okay, so I'll just finish off by showing these books that I use. And I apologize to the folks at home, but I'll just read out the titles on the book. So my #1 book for mammals and birds is called Tracking and the Art of Seeing. And it's How to Read Animal Tracks and Sign. It's by Paul Resemblance. And there's a little section in here on birds. So it's a bit of both of mammals and birds. And then if you want to go to something that's a bit more rigorous and detailed, a book called Bird Tracks and Sign, A Guide to North American Species by Mark Elbrock and Eleanor Marks is an excellent book. A bit pricey, but I often go to that for answers. I'm going to look for the turkey vulture in here in a minute. Other book that I've been going to a lot because my interest in the whole nest thing has been only just the past few years, so I'm still kind of a newbie. But this book has been a really big help to me. It's called Nests, Eggs, and Nestlings of North American Birds, 2nd edition by Paul Bachuk and Colin Harrison. So that's another excellent book. It's full of plates that show the, there we go. Show the eggs. See that's in the back, more or less. And then bird feathers. This book has been really helpful. It's called Bird Feathers by David Scott and Casey McFarlane. And I found this to be very helpful. In fact, remember I struggled with the white-breasted nuthatch feathers that I had? I got the answer in here. And then as far as feathers go, there's a website called the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Feather Atlas website. That's a great website for feathers. It's obviously a free website, free to access. And my website is donaldmcleod.com. I have a page where I list some of these resources, so you can always check that out too. That'll be it for questions. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Could not have imagined all of those different things, and now we'll all be scouring the snow and identifying all our bird tracks, so that was fabulous, thank you. Go ahead, Marina, do your magic here. Hopefully, we won't have to wait 10 years for your mammal tracks and signs. That's always a good one of my favorites. Okay, so next meeting, Friday, November 29th, and we're gonna be talking about possums. And actually, I did see a roadkill possum just a week ago in my neighborhood. So they are here. I've seen a couple myself, so it's kind of cool little creature. And outings coming up Sunday, October 20th, Kirkland Warbler, and Thursday, October 24th, the Weber property walk. Okay, and again, renew your memberships for 2025. And we'll see you all in November, if not before. Thank you.